Okay, after sitting through that last long, boring lesson, I'm sure you're all chomping at the bits, ready to get started drawing something. But before we do, there's one other thing we need to set here. Whenever you start a new drawing, the very first thing you need to do is set your units. So if you would, type in units at the command line and hit enter. Here you have the drawing units dialog box. So here you can see we have insertion scale, we have angle, and we have length. And this is all for input into and making sure that you get the precision that Autocad has to offer. By default, your insertion scale is set to inches. So if you click on that, you can see you can set it to anything you want to represent as what is a base unit. What that means is that anytime you type in 1, depending upon what your insertion scale in, Autocad is going to read whether it's 1 inch, 1 foot, 1 mile, 1 millimeter, whatever. The whole number 1 represents 1 unit in an inch. Now let's look at the length. By default, it's set as decimal, which means that if you type in a whole number of 1, that means 1.0 is 1 inch. The precision by default is set to 4 points past the decimal point, which means that if you put in 1.5, that means 1.5 inches. If you put in 1.05, that means 1 5/100ths of an inch, etc. And as you can see by the drop down, you can set that down to just the micro point of whatever unit it is that you are using. Typically, if you're dealing with metric, you're going to want to leave it at decimal. You're going to set your units to millimeters. But you will never need down to the 10,000th of a millimeter for your precision. Typically, when I'm using millimeters, I typically go down to a half of a millimeter for the precision. That's just for rounding off purposes, and that is plenty. But today, most of the time, we use inches, and like I said, I typically use architectural. I set my precision with architectural down to 1/16th of an inch. I find that is usually accurate enough, and it's probably closer to anything that they're going to build out in the field. Now, as far as angles go, by default, you can see decimal degrees is the standard, but you can set it, depending upon what kind of drawing, to format it to any type of angle format that you need. Typically, I leave it at decimal degrees, but I usually put it 3 points past the decimal because 1,000th of a degree, depending upon how far away you are from center, depends upon how far that spread gets between points of your degree. I found that 1,000th of a degree, you have to get a fair amount out away from the center point before that starts being an issue. Okay, we have our unit set. We're working with inches, architectural, decimal degrees of 3 points past the 0, and hit OK. You are ready to draw. All right, let's get started drawing some lines. Go ahead and type in L and enter. That's the shortcut for lines. And if you notice down by your command prompt, the computer is asking you to specify the first point. So go ahead and click anywhere on your screen, and you will notice that after you click and you drag your mouse cursor around, that the computer draws a straight line from the point you picked to wherever your mouse cursor is. Go ahead and click a few points around on your screen, and you will notice that Autocad draws a perfectly straight line between those 2 points. Hit enter. That will end the command. Congratulations, you have just drawn your first lines in Autocad. If you run your mouse cursor over any one of them, you will notice that they highlight and give you this little broken arrow that will indicate that the computer is looking at that line. If you click on the line, you will notice that the line highlights with a few of these little blue boxes. Those are known as grip handles, and those are primarily for editing your line. If you grab the corner, for example, you can drag the end of that line anywhere you would like to put it. Now, if you've done something like this and all of a sudden you say, oh no, I wish I hadn't moved that line, hit the U button and hit enter. That says undo. That puts the line back down here to the last point it was, or the last command that it just undid. If you hit U and enter again, you will notice our line goes back to the original point that it was. We moved that grip handle to two different places. So we undid those two moves of the command. That's your undo command. Okay, hit escape. And what that does is that no longer has your line selected. Here's something you need to know when you get into editing. When you click on a line, whether it be one line or many lines, that is known as a selection set. So if you're going to do editing commands, you first have to define what lines or what objects you want to edit, and then you can invoke the command. So you have a selection set here. If I were to type E and enter for erase, you will notice that the lines erase. If I type U for undo, the lines will come back. Okay, those are all based upon selection sets. You can also first invoke the command, for instance, erase, and hit enter, and the computer will then ask you to make your selection set. Those are selection sets, and you need to understand what those were, simply because all your editing commands, you have to select the object in order to edit it. So whether it is a single object or a multiple objects, once they're selected, they are known as a selection set. Okay, so now you know that. Now, we have some lines drawn here, but what really do they mean? We may need, there's going to be many times you're going to need to have information about an individual line. You're going to want to know the length of the line, the angle that the line is drawn at, etc. So what you're going to do here is you're going to type list and select a line. Okay, this dialog box here gives us everything you need to know about that line that you just had chosen. It gives you the from point, in other words, the point that it started from, and it gives you the end point, the to point. The X, Y, and Z coordinates are all based upon a graph, and if you remember in our first lesson, this right here is known as the User Coordinate System icon, the UCS icon. And by default, it sits down here at what is your lower left-hand corner of your paper, and that is considered 0, 0. If you have your grid on like I do now, you will notice that you have these grid boxes. So one corner here would be 1 unit in the X and 1 unit in the Y. So if we look at the from point, you will notice that the from point of the line we chose, this one here, starts at 2 foot 1 1/8 inch away from 0, 0 in the X direction, and it's 1 foot 2 15/16 away from 0, 0 in the Y direction. So that gives you the starting point of the line. Since it's flat on the paper, the Z direction shows that it's 0. Now the to point is the end point of the line, and it is 2 foot 6 inches to the right of 0, and it's 1 foot 7 7/8 of an inch up from the 0, 0 in the Y direction. So those basically are just defining points into space. It's all based upon mathematics and the grid system. So that tells you everything you need to know about this line when you list a line. Again, the shortcut is LI, and you hit enter and then select your objects. And again, it tells you everything. It tells you what layer you're on. It tells you that you're in model space, and that will become more relevant in a later lesson. It tells you the to and from points. It tells you how long that line is. That line is 7 3/8 of an inch long, and it's at an angle of 48.704 degrees off of 0. That may be a good time to discuss how we look at angles. When we listed our line a few seconds ago, it told us that the line was drawn at 48.704 degrees. What that means is Autocad reads degrees as 0 heading off from your last point picked straight out to 3 o'clock direction in a straight line. That is 0 degrees. All degrees from 0 are measured in a counterclockwise direction by default in Autocad. So when you're looking at 90 degrees, that is straight up. 180 degrees is straight out to your left, and 270 degrees is straight down. So our line, when we listed it a moment ago, was at 48.704 degrees, and that's off of 0. So that is a little bit of a clue as to how Autocad looks at directions. Now, let's take a look at a different type of line. Type PL and hit enter. This is a polyline. So let's go ahead and, just like our other line, let's go ahead and click some points out here in our drawing. Here I've kind of duplicated the other line that we drew. If you pick any segment, like I showed you before on our first line, you will notice that just one segment of the line gets highlighted. However, if you click on our polyline on any segment, it highlights the entire line. And that's because a polyline is a multi-segmented line. A regular line is an individual segment line, and a polyline is a multi-segmented line. You can see that it has grip points, just like our first line, that you can edit individual grip points and move that line along. But whenever you do, it affects not just an individual line, like when we did an individual line, it only affects that line. A polyline affects, no matter what, will affect at least 2 segments of a line if you're editing it. So those are polyline versus a regular line, and now you know about that. Let's take a look at some other creation tools, shall we? Let's erase all of these. Now, if you notice, when I did the command, let me back that up. We had all of these lines, and when I said erase, and I clicked out here, not on a line, and dragged, you notice that this box came. And when I clicked on it, it selected everything that the box crossed. Let's undo that again. If you were to go this way, if you notice, it only erased some of the lines. So depending upon how you actually choose your selection set when dragging a selection box, if you choose it from left to right, it will only choose things that are completely encompassed by the box. If you put your selection box from right to left, anything that crosses the window at all will be selected and highlighted for your thing. So that's a little something to know about when making selection sets. You can either pick individual objects to make your selection set, or you can drag whole boxes around. If you remembered a few minutes ago when we listed our line, let's list it again. We had a line that was 7 3/8 inches long, and it was 48.704 degrees as far as the angle in the XY plane. If you remember this whole listing box, the line is listed the from point and the to point. That's the beginning and the end points of the line out in space. This from where to where is something that you absolutely need to memorize when working with Autocad. Virtually every command's procedure follows that rule. From where to where. If you're drawing a line, it is from where to where. If you're moving an object, it is from where to where. If you're going to copy an object, it is from where to where. So the procedure for most commands in AutoCAD follows that general rule. So memorize that. Okay, like I said, we're about to take a look at some other creation tools. So having said that, with the from where to where, let's take a look. If you were going to draw a circle, the command line down here is asked to specify the center point of the circle. You will also notice that in parentheses and brackets there are some other things, and these are options, and these options that go along with the circle command are known as subcommands. Those are other things that we will get into in just a moment. But for the time being, we've invoked the circle command, and it is asking for a center point. So you click for your center point. That is your from where point. Now the radius of the circle is what it's asking for. That is your to point. You can either click a point out here and set the radius of your circle, or you can specifically say 4 inches. Just type in 4 down here at the command line. It will look at the default inches, and now you have a circle with a radius of 4 inches. If we were to list this line, you will see it's a circle, model space, the center point, that's the from where, and then the radius, which is 4 inches, which is the to where. It also tells you the circumference of your circle and the area of the circle and how many square inches and what percentage of square feet the area of that circle occupies. So by listing a circle, it has all kinds of information. And again, creating the circle falls along that basic rule of from where to where. But let's look at some of those subcommands for a circle, shall we? Type circle again and give it the from where point. Oh, sorry, let's not do that. Let's type in circle. You'll notice that you have 3P, 2P, and TTR. That's tangent, tangent, radius. We're not even going to look at that third one, but let's look at the first two, the 3P and 2P. What if you were to type here 3P and enter for a subcommand, now it's asking for a point on the circle. So if you click here, now it's going to ask for the second point on a circle, and we to click here, those are 2 points. Now it's looking for a third point on the circle that is going to define what that circle is. That comes in handy sometimes when you have to fit a circle in things. You can pick on 3 points and define the circle, or you can pick on, if you're tracing something, very often a circle, you're just going to pick on 3 points on an image, and that way you're going to get your circle. Now likewise with the 3 point, if you were to have typed in 2 point, what it's doing there is it's asking for 2 points that you're defining of that circle. So that is a 3 point and a 2 point circle creations. Okay, so in this lesson, we got you started by drawing. You learned what a basic line was. You learned what a polyline was. You learned how to create circles. You learned what selection sets were and how important they are. You've learned how AutoCAD reads angles. And we've done some basic drawing of all of these things. One of the other important things that you learned is that in all of the commands, well, almost all of the commands that AutoCAD does, the general principle is from where to where. So with everything we've learned here, keep that into mind. In the next lesson, we will get into learning how to do precision drawing. We'll learn about object snaps and how to make sure things are right down to the gnat's ass if you're doing some kind of architectural or mechanical drawings. So we'll learn a little bit more about precision. We'll learn a little bit more about editing, copying, and some other general rules that should be fun. So until next time, this is Art Hughes saying thanks for watching.